What am I supposed to start with? I don't even know how to start.
We turned sorry.
Is it on?
It's really on. Just roll call, basically.
Do I call the meeting to order at the time? Is it echoing? Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
So call Comprehensive Residential Code Review Committee meeting for Tuesday, November 28th, 2023 at 7:02. 5:02, excuse me. Start with roll call.
Duke Garbley.
Ryan Ryder.
Jay Van Bavel.
Tom Farrell.
Alex Robinette. Okay. Are there any public comments? Anybody signed up or on Zoom?
No public comments and now on Zoom.
Okay. So moving on. Consent agenda. Discussion and possible action on the meetings from the November 14th, 2023 CRCRC meeting. Did everybody have a chance to go over the minutes?
Yes.
Have any comments?
Move approval.
Second.
Fantastic. Moving right along. Regular agenda.
Oh,
You
we
got
got
to
a
vote.
Oh.
call a vote.
Call a vote.
Call vote. It's minutes.
You've got a lawyer on the committee, damn it. We're going to do Robert's rules.
To call a vote for
Modified.
approving the meeting
For
minutes?
approving the minutes, yeah.
Oh, how did I miss
All in
that?
favor?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Fantastic.
Any opposed?
Any opposed?
Negative.
Okay. All right. Missed that one. Okay, regular agenda. Discussion and possible action to review highlights and findings from the survey. I thought I would just quickly recap where we are, how we got where we are right now, which was after we received the survey, we all immediately started to sort and collate all of the different questions. We compiled the comments in yes and no columns. We read them. We sorted different things, took, people that said no to this or yes to that. We looked at what various age groups were saying and compared them. We looked at people that have lived here a long time, people that have not lived here a long time, people that rent, multiple property owners. We kind of did a very careful deep dive. We sorted words that were used regularly, tried to kind of see some of the hot button words, how often they were used and appeared in the comments. So that was kind of the first step, just kind of basically taking all the data and sorting it and organizing it so that we could then each of us kind of go through and start to summarize some of the things that we saw, some of the quotes and comments that stood out to us. We did that and we discussed some of that last time. But last time I think we only really had just gotten the survey and none of us had really had a chance to kind of weigh in on what we were thinking. And does anybody want to just open up the conversation right now with some things that they've thought about since the last meeting, or keep moving on through the questions?
The only comment I'd make is, Alex, thank you so much for doing all that work that you did.
Second that motion. Thank you. And that one doesn't require a vote.
No.
Thank you very much,
You
Alex.
bet.
You went way above and beyond
Wow.
the call of duty to do that, to do this work.
I have to say, it's. I looked at this and I thought, the easy way out is just stop, just accept. I went through and read this, but I mean, it was interesting. You did a marvelous job.
Well, we want to show that we're doing our due diligence and we're reading and listening and interpreting and trying to be careful. So then we had the summary that people were filling in, and then Jeff made most recently a recommendations document that looks like everybody has had a chance to write something either here or on their own. So if we want to start with that, or again, if anybody has any general comments they want to make.
It seems that we still have on just the summary comments, still one member not submitting anything. Certainly, we have the majority of it, that's doing it, but it's not complete. And the same thing with the recommendation spreadsheet. Until just a few minutes ago, we had 4 of us making recommendations, so it's incomplete.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
It's incomplete because some of us don't have the technical capabilities to do more than write notes.
and I think Tom also
Tom's
mentioned
done the same thing,
he's
and
got
so-
comments.
Well,
And I
I-
haven't seen yours here yet, but I just see these.
Well, I sent mine to Dave,
Okay.
but
Maybe Dave put them into this document.
he hasn't yet, I don't think.
Okay.
But I have them here, and they are, Brian, I did type mine up. I mean, I did include them in the document that I sent back to him.
But I would hesitate to make any, summaries or compilation of people's recommendations until we have, everybody that wants to give them.
I agree. I think that, I'm not sure that we're actually going to make recommendations today at this meeting. I don't know if that, is that an action item that we can do?
Well, I think that we need to figure out.
Possible action to support.
Who attended the meeting with the city council at which Dave was going to ask kind of for guidance as to what the city council wanted from us? This addresses your question, Jay, about what we're gonna do today, because we're gonna do, I think, ultimately what the council wants and give them the feedback that they need. And I don't know what the council asked us to do. Alex, did you attend that, or was Dave the only one that was
Dave.
there?
Dave was, but didn't he write it up? Was that the November 16th meeting? Is that, or was there one more
It
recently?
was right after the 14th, so that
So-
should be right.
He did summarize it. I can read it if you want.
Did he send out an email that But
He
it went in one ear and out the other to me?
He did, but that's okay. He said council decided that CRCRC would redact all addresses mentioned from the CRCRC data and post the data set along with the supporting documents on the website. He took the opportunity to inquire about the expected level of detail for our recommendations. The response was to deliver recommendations to the same level of detail as the level of detail in the survey. I was advised that we should bring a professional planner on board prior to making recommendations to ensure that whatever we're recommending is legal and doable, and that wording of our work products/recommendations passes muster. He said he was going to ask Ashley to request planning service ASAP, hopefully at our next meeting. So maybe that's
Actually,
That
you
must
were,
be now.
were you at the city council meeting?
I was.
And that's a good analogy.
So
Okay.
there's a step before we can make recommendations then. We have to summarize our collective view, then go through the legal channel to see what's possible, and then we finalize a recommendation. So I think for that interim step, that preliminary step, we can work on that today.
Yeah.
a good plan.
Would it be possible to first have a consensus on which items we don't need to address anymore? Because that was pretty clear on the summary comments, I think.
I think impervious cover was the only one that pretty much everybody said, do nothing here. I don't know about you.
Well, I have a discussion point on impervious cover in the sense that gets related to the Florida area ratio issue as well. And the Florida area ratio issue, I think we have comments that raised in my mind at least questions of whether the Florida area ratio ought to be the whole building or just the slab. And if it's just the slab, in other words, the footprint of whatever is being built, and that's the area that we're going to do the ratio of the lot size to the building size, then we're talking about that implicates setbacks and it implicates the other issues that are there. So,
Brian, I have a problem with looking at FAR, impervious cover, and setbacks separately. Because it seems like to me, if you increase the setbacks, you have potentially reduced the FAR and the impervious cover. So I kind of look at these three items
Or interrelated.
as interrelated.
You've been more articulate than I was about that, but that was the gist of what I was trying to say, that those are interrelated and the recommendations need to all be.
You just out wordsmithed an attorney.
That's it. Well, not
You know,
a super
he's been
attorney.
a politician and elected as mayor
Yeah.
more than once, and so, you know, the politician always outdoes the lawyer.
One thing I meant to bring up before at these meetings, when we talked about these items, about limitations on size and everything, Rollingwood has a ordinance that says the minimum size of a house you can build in Rollingwood, both on a single story and a two-story house on that. We've all forgot about it because it's.
What is it? 900 square feet or something?
I think it's 1,800 square feet for the first floor, and it can't be less than 2,400 feet
On a two-story.
for a two-story. I hadn't looked it up in 20 years, so for God's sake, don't quote it. But there is some numbers that we have that are in our ordinances dating back to the 60s,
Yeah.
maybe the 50s. Duke, I'm sure you've read them.
Hey, I was so poor when I first moved to Rollingwood, I looked at that number pretty carefully.
I'm glad you've thrived. But that's something that when people fuss about us talking about limitations on size, I've brought that up before, and I apologize, I didn't tell you about that before, but we have numbers already in our ordinance.
Yeah.
They are the minimum size.
And I suggest that has become pretty moot, given the course of history.
It- I don't think there's been anything that's going to change that, but you never know.
And there's nothing regarding a third story.
There is. We have, and the third story issue is a little separate deal, and that's a much more complicated deal than you might add, because there's a lot of additions on that I'd like to talk about, and if now is the proper time, I'll be glad to do it. We have all of us pay insurance rates on hazard insurance based on a rating that the city of Rollingwood gets. That's a separate rating from Westlake or Austin or anywhere else. We have our own rating, okay? Now, historically, we have looked at that and said, gone to the state fire marshal and said, okay, we are and I never can get this right, 1 is really good or 1 is really bad. I can't remember, but 1 to 5 is what it goes to. And the difference in what you pay might be $30 a month on your rate if we jump it from one to the other or it goes the other way down. Okay?
All right.
So we have actually looked at the analysis and said, okay, we want to raise taxes XYZ to put in new fire hydrants. And with that fire hydrant, you're going to pay, with the new tax, you're going to pay me $20 a month, but you're going to save $30 a month on insurance.
Because we got a better rating by having more fire hydrants.
That's right.
Okay, I follow that.
And that's an easy analogy to look at, but we haven't, the 3-story houses, I think, could affect that rate, and I'm just not sure, and I meant to call over to the fire department, I didn't get a chance to do that. But that's on my list to do.
Okay.
Because I think that if we're saying, which I think the point has been brought up before, I can swing my arm off as far as I want as long as I don't hit you in the nose. All right. If I am building a 3-story house and it's costing each one of us $30 a month or whatever that number is, then that's
But
a,
they
that's-
pay a higher, they get assessed at a higher value, so they're gonna subsidize the rest of us.
well, on ad valorem taxes. But remember,
What Tom's talking about is that the fire department says it's harder to
May.
put out a fire in a three-story house than it is a two-story house, and it's more of a risk.
No, I understand that,
Okay,
but then separately, there's also the property tax assessment
Yeah.
from the city of Rollingwood.
yeah.
And typically, three-story houses have higher square footage,
Yeah.
and they're going to carry a higher
Yeah.
cost.
right,
That they're paying a higher amount back to the city.
Higher
Than
valuation,
the two-story
higher
houses.
taxes.
and Jeff, I think that's a good point, because, I mean, it's just, you know, would that make up for it? Because remember, the average Rollingwood resident is paying $1,200 a year in taxes to the city of Rollingwood, which
Which is a small part of the damn tax.
which is basically paying for your, I mean, it's best bargain any one of us is gonna get in this life, I think, for that. So it's a different deal, on that. And I'm just looking at it from a standpoint, I think that's something that we need to
Consider, yeah.
consider, on that. They may come back and say, look, as long as, if it's over 4,000 feet, which I'm guessing it would be, and you're putting in a sprinkler system, no harm, no foul. It's not gonna make any difference to us. But I do know the fire department has got, a minimal amount of, ability to go vertical on fires,
On their equipment.
on the equipment. And
Do we have, Tom, and, Duke, whoever knows the ordinances, or if anybody, do we have requirements for, either alarm systems or sprinkler systems?
yes,
We do,
we do.
required for sprinkler.
If it's over 4,000 feet, then you're required to have a sprinkler system.
It's lower than that.
Is it lower?
Because
Really?
I have one
If
in
it's
mind,
new and
close to 4,000.
maybe 2,500.
It started
right.
as,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And then there's a rule for if it's a remodel. You know, if you improve it, the value by over 50%, I think you gotta sprinkle the whole thing.
And that was passed at the request of the fire department back 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It's been,
15, 20.
yeah, it's been a long
That's a
time.
good, point. It raises the issue with me, and I hadn't even considered it before, Tom, is that we've been thinking that we're dealing with the city and the residents in our work here, but there's apparently third parties, like the fire department, that I hadn't considered as being part of what we're doing here. What
Yeah.
other third parties are there?
Well, there's, I mean, if you want to consider the city of Austin a third party, because we are wholesale customers, water and wastewater,
And electric.
and electric.
But I mean, I think there's a fire code issue about side yard setbacks. So the 25 feet, I mean, I got educated on this when Kerry Kaler was here. But, you know, the 25 feet or 10 and 15
Yeah.
is a fire code issue from structure to structure.
Because
Is
the
that so that
house
the
can
fire
catch the next
department can
house on fire? Is that what?
And that changes,
You mean 10 is the absolute minimum for fire code?
yeah.
So, you know, it's kind of like, okay, hey, whoever gets there first, you get to say what yours is, and then the next door adjoining property
Yeah.
has to take the leftover.
Yeah.
So
And the
the
25 is
25
minimal
feet.
from fire, for fire standpoint.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I had a project that was a remodel, and we were able to negotiate
Yeah.
something greater than 10, but less than 15, because the adjacent property owner was, let's say, 13, you know.
This is not as a big of issue now because the feds decided that you can't write off all of your taxes, Brian. But you have a limitation. So the math on that, Jeff, this is kind of an interesting, and now when you look at this, because there's a lot of factors you'd build in. As to how you'd look at that from a standpoint of doing the math of saying, gee, this is going to be great. We're going to earn some money, but it's going to cost us X, Y, Z, to do that. I would, maybe the best way, rather than me talking to the fire department, and I think I hired most of the guys doing that now, back when they were interns back in the day, but maybe we invite them to a meeting and just kind of lay this out and see what they can do. In all honesty, the best way to do it is to kind of give them the questions so they can research some of it. Some of it may have to go to the state fire
question is,
marshal.
what part of your requirements, what part of your process, your regulations impact our land use regulations? That's the question.
Well,
And that's new to me, that there's a third party that has
well,
that.
now he's gonna,
We
they're
should've
gonna
thought
tell
about it. I
you.
should have thought about it, but now that we're thinking about it, if the city of Austin, from which we get our water and wastewater, do any of the regulations of that contract, or any of the provisions of that
No.
contract tell us maximums, minimums, number of bathrooms,
No.
other things that would be relevant to the development ordinance, Tom?
No, it doesn't. We have limitations on the gross amount of water and the gross amount of wastewater that we can take and give to the, and hopefully we don't get those mixed up, to the city of Austin.
It seems that a part of the city council's recommendations were when we come up with a set of recommendations, that we have an outside expert come in to this committee
Yeah.
and talk about those recommendations and how they do or do not fit in with existing codes. And I'm not sure who that expert is or what, but I would assume they would know
Kay
about
Freese?
fire codes and, you know.
Would Kay Freese
Just,
be second?
Brian, I want to make sure that I'm saying this right. They're not going to tell you, I don't believe, that as a fire department, as a ESD number 9, that they impact that they dictate or have an effect on your land code as a city.
Well,
What they're going to say is, and the question would be, is if we change our land code, is it going to affect our iOS rating?
well, no, I think it's more basic in the sense that, and it may not be the building code, but it's in our plating code, I am sure there are requirements that street curves have certain radius so that they can get their trucks around it. And there are I'm aware of some regulations that fire safety codes have on plating, because I've done a lot of plating in my life in my professional world. And grades on the streets.
Cul-de-sacs.
And the cul-de-sac sizes and whatnot, all have requirements from fire departments
Good point.
for safety. But I don't think that is in our
Bailiwick.
parameters here of what we're dealing with. But having said that, there are some real criteria that the fire department has on land use, some real requirements that the fire department has on land use, I think we ought to ask them whether that applies to any of the building issues. Is Nikki still here?
Nikki's not here, but just to speak to the process, so the fire department does review all of the plans as well. So we review them, the engineers review them for zoning and drainage, and then the fire department does review them for fire. I don't think I've come into an instance where they passed our zoning, but then something in the zoning code didn't match up with the fire department, but it'd probably be more of a what would they recommend, as far as, things that they would like to see, but as far as I know, there's not anything that currently conflicts.
Yeah, I think there are some state requirements in regard to like the turnarounds in a cul-de-sac for emergency
And I
vehicles.
don't think that's within what this
No.
committee's supposed to
No.
be doing. But it just raises the question, I guess that, and you're trying to answer that question, is whether the fire department criteria, regulations, whatever they are, do impact what we're going to do.
Well,
With respect to height setback,
And I do apologize for coming in, and I wish I could have been here earlier. I promise you, it would have been more fun to be here than what I was doing. But regardless, and go back to the survey, and while we're talking about this, Alex, but the question is, do you want to see a limitation on size of homes? If I had put a caveat on that and said, are you willing to pay extra for your insurance to allow somebody to build a larger home in Rollingwood?
If I'm willing to pay
You,
more on my
Brian
insurance for you building a bigger
That's
house
right.
in Rollingwood, that would be an interesting study.
Let me guess how that would come out.
Well,
But-
it would be good to know.
And I think we can find out easily enough, and I apologize. I knew
We've
that,
done this-
What is
we've
the
done the survey.
organization you mentioned, ISA?
ISO,
it's,
iOS, you said ISO. Okay.
and I do get it, I always get it mixed up, 1 to 5, 5 to 1, but that's, the smart thing for cities to do is do the math and say, gee, it used to be a lot easier when you wrote off all your taxes, because I'd say, Brian, I'm going to raise your taxes $20 a month, but you're going to be able to write that off, but you're going to save $30 a month for insurance, and you can't write that off anyway.
But you save it, it's not an expense. Okay, I follow all that, but,
But we can get the answer, and they may say, nothing. It's no big deal, one way or the other.
Well, the question started with, was there something we could eliminate? And
so far we've added things.
didn't go as quickly as I thought it would, but that's okay. It's a good discussion. So there's really two things we could do. We could either eliminate some of the questions we think, or we could tackle the things that seem most pressing, or most obvious. So
I would think there's a couple items that we could just take off the agenda, because impervious cover, we have 5, 6 out of the 7 members saying there's nothing here, don't touch, no need.
well, the drainage manual captures a lot of that, and some of the various other tools we've looked at, I think. And I think that impervious cover is kind of a hot button topic. And so to the extent that maybe we can not go there, I think would be beneficial. If there are other things that could, nuance some of that. I don't know.
Again, I've always put all 3 of those items
Yeah,
in my mind together,
there
Jay.
is overlap.
But frankly, impervious cover, I've looked at that a bunch of times here, and I keep thinking, that's the least favorable way to get there, in my opinion. I think you can get there a lot better way. So I agree with you. If I'm not if I'm the outlier on that, I'm in. I'll just tell you that, and get rid of it.
And until I'm blue in the face, I will reiterate what Alex just said. Our drainage ordinance controls that.
Right.
I mean, you've heard me say this
Which
before, but
one,
I've
what
talked.
controls that?
Hmm?
What, say that again.
The drainage ordinance
Right.
controls impervious coverage. And in a proactive way, and I've talked to our previous civil engineer, and
Is it our drainage ordinance, or is it the TCEQ and Barton Springs?
No, we have a drainage, we have our own separate,
ours.
it's,
Drainage item,
yeah, it's called the Drainage Criteria Manual.
okay.
So,
In my own personal experience, trying to work with TCEQ and the Rollingwood Drainage, and TCEQ, some people made comments that it's easier, that it's not as stringent, but getting to anything done through them was just impossible. They wouldn't respond to anything. So we adhere to the Rollingwood Drainage Manual, and I think it's adequate for controlling impervious cover.
Tom will reiterate this. TCEQ, they don't want anything to do with
No,
Residential,
no.
Yeah,
They
you know,
don't.
it's a pain in the neck to them.
Now, I think TCQ got stuck with this from the EPA under the Clean Water Act, when Texas said, we'll do it, Jay, and they don't want to do it. And I'm surprised that you, the only thing on our drainage criteria manual that I made a note of in my notes, which y'all haven't gotten yet, sorry, was we're spending a lot of homeowners, home builders, and homeowners building a house are spending a lot of money on our drainage criteria manual to adhere to it. And I'm not sure that that's the best bang for our buck in this, the way we're doing it. I may be wrong, but I helped pass that daggone drainage criteria manual because it was a start, but I'm still not convinced that that's, I hear stories, I don't know if they're true. I spent $50,000 on the drainage criteria manual of Rolling Wood trying to, do this.
Well, I
That's
did
not-
too, but that's what it took to
But is that,
implement what seems to be working,
well, I think,
to control drainage and runoff.
It's only, we're stuck with that because, the train left the station a long time ago and we
I know.
can't go back. I mean, if we wanna just start and tear up our community and create, regional controls, okay, we could do that, but that's not.
But yeah,
I
we'd
don't
have to
think
buy
that's-
up some houses and tear them down and build ponds.
well, there were,
That's not gonna go over very well.
when we
No.
did that drainage study, Ashley's gonna help me with these numbers because I've forgotten it now. There were 8 houses in Rolling Wood that had water issues from drainage. And of the 8, either 4 or 6 had water that went across their yard somewhere. Didn't go in the house, but went across. We had 2 or 3 that had water that would go in, that they had drainage issues that would go in their house. Of those 2 or 3, 2 of them were in a 10-year or 20-year floodplain. In a creek. They built in the creek bottom.
Yeah, probably before there was such a thing as a floodplain under the floodplain rules.
Probably, but
I think the first floodplain rules were.
I'm not
passed in
blaming
1960.
the people for building
Yeah.
there because
Yeah, that's just a
Lord,
fact.
we've had droughts that went on for years. But that's getting back to our point on this. I think, Jay, I'm not arguing that we need to spend money on drainage. I'm just wondering. I think we've had this in effect long enough that I think a recommendation I would make to the city was, let's look back and see if this is the best use of those funds, whether, if Jay's gonna pay $50,000, I'm not asking you whether you did or not, Jay, but if you spend whatever money it was, if that's the best use of that money, or we could use it buying these 2 houses or whatever.
Those houses are going to be redeveloped. All of Rolling Wood is going to be redeveloped
Yeah.
at some point in
Agree.
the not too terribly distant future, I would think. Maybe not in my lifetime, but certainly within Jeff's
Close.
lifetime. And that'll solve the problem because the
Yeah.
house there that is rebuilt will have to be rebuilt according to the new standards, which means it's gonna be up. You cannot build in a 10 or 20-year floodplain anymore, 25. You can build in the 100, but you have to build it up. So those problems are going to ultimately be solved.
It may be the 100. I shouldn't have brought
I don't know how that, again, though, I don't know how that affects what we're supposed to be doing. Except that the fact that if Duke is right, that the drainage ordinance,
covers.
in effect, solves the problem of having to discuss impervious cover, we can take that off.
In the short term, we can take that off until it
I'm good
goes
with
back
it.
But I
up
do
for-
have one question. I don't have a pool. But I understand that there is some controversy in the neighborhood about whether pool decks and pools go into the impervious cover issue, and should we try to address that just because it's an issue in the community, or do we just get under the table and don't worry about
I
it?
wish Nikki was here,
In our
but
community,
for some reason,
It's not impervious coverage and we shouldn't touch it. City of Austin.
is that the state rule?
Which
about
But
a
the pool
swimming
is not
pool is
impervious
not
cover,
impervious
notwithstanding
cover?
it's concrete
Rollingwood
block.
and TCQ have their own rules, and they each count it differently.
They do count it differently?
So I know the wood, like a wood deck counts 50% for one of them, and it's a different set of rules. It's very confusing when you're working through trying to build a pool.
But how about the pool itself, Jeff? Did you remember?
The pool actually benefited from an impervious cover. Actually, I'm trying to remember.
I don't think it's considered impervious coverage.
No, it's
Yeah,
not
the
for
pool-
Rollingwood, but for TCQ?
For TCEQ, I had to hire, after we built the house, I had to hire a separate civil engineer that specialized in how we could actually put it in our pool and calculate the pool itself as like a basin that would capture the water, and then we called the grass behind it. What's that term for the grass? The
It's
Swell.
Detention or?
well, it's a,
Swell.
no,
No, it's
we call it overland filtration.
yeah, water filtration strips.
Yeah,
We put in water filtration strips.
that's right.
So we had to put this elaborate plan together for TCQ, and they looked at it and they're like, "Just don't bother us, leave me alone." But I wasn't able to get the pool approved through the city of Rollingwood until TCQ gave their sign off. And you have to find the right civil engineer that knows how to work the system in order to get this all through the process.
So you've got 6 inches of space on your pool from the top of the pool to the water.
Yeah, the
Roughly.
coping around the pool counts against you. So we had to count that for impervious cover, and then we weren't allowed to like there's restrictions around what you talked about earlier with the pool deck. I mean, that was a big thing. Like figuring out what material you're allowed to use and what you're not allowed
Is that
to
within the parameters of
use.
what we're supposed to be dealing with?
Well, it's part of impervious cover.
Sounds like it should be.
But we've said that we're not gonna touch impervious cover.
Yeah.
The rules about pools are part of the drainage manual.
The other,
It's not a separate ordinance, right?
I don't recall those details.
I
Do you recall?
don't know,
Well, I
Jenny.
mean, again, the coping and things that are truly impervious, they have to fit into the drainage criteria. Because I didn't build a pool, but I put a pool on a future plan and said, hey, I want my drainage, or I want my, what I'm doing drainage wise to cover all that stuff in case we do that in the future.
So, Brian, there is some comments we
That was
had
smart.
about, right
Wish I did
now,
that.
you can build a swimming pool,
I did that.
not a walkway, not a deck, but a swimming pool in the setback.
You can't.
Not
You
not
cannot?
a pool,
Not a
you can do a
pool.
deck in the setback.
Deck in the
Yeah.
setback, I got it
Not the
backwards.
pool. The water line has to be on the setback.
Because I knew we had some issues in the city about people saying they built this pool too close to the back setback, and it's,
I think it was dealing with decks, the comments were dealing with decks where they
Okay.
were overlooking their neighbor's backyard
oh,
because it went into the setback. But that's a setback issue, I think.
Okay, do you have, now that we got rid of that simple one, Jay, do you have other candidates for things we're not going to talk about?
Well,
Alex probably has an idea.
I think that we should maybe not necessarily eliminate impervious cover, because a lot of issues have come up that I think are important, because the amount of impervious cover that you're talking about could affect house size, and maybe there's some give and take, and I think we want to find ways to clean up our rules that make some of these things reasonable. So let's just pass on that for now. I don't think,
Well, I guess what I'm suggesting is that the committee would not make specific recommendations regarding impervious cover. Because the consensus is that that's not something we want to do.
Not initially. I mean, if we want to talk about expanding scope
yeah,
down the
Yeah.
road,
I think
the issues that I just cited are very personal to me, and I think that things could be cleaned up, but there's so much that we're trying to attack at once. I don't think that should be the primary focus. I don't think that's why we're here.
yeah, I think we could put it on a list of sort of secondary topics that
Right.
we might get to,
Other
but,
candidates for secondary topics?
Circular driveways.
well,
Pardon?
Circular driveways. there
is
seems
one
to-
to, yeah, I think that one is low hanging fruit. I think,
I'm gonna give you I'm not opposed to them, don't get me wrong. The reason we have a, ordinance against circular driveways was the visual effect of having houses that look like they are not hitting the, if you're on a corner and you build at 20 feet rather than 30 feet, and everybody else is building 30 feet back, it's going to give a visual impact on one side or the other. That's just why it was done. I'm not, as far as I know, there's probably 15 or 20 circular driveways in Rollingwood, and nothing bad has happened. So,
You know, is there a safety issue there? I know that the city of Austin and its commercial regulations that are building regulations, you have to have a 200-foot separation between driveways.
Yeah, that's correct.
Because you just, the traffic, if you've got, every 20 feet, you've got somebody pulling into the street, it interrupts the flow, but I don't know that that's true here.
Well, I mean, usually I mean, I know there's a preponderance of circular driveways on Rollingwood Drive, because it's hard to back out on Rollingwood.
I
Yeah.
completely
That's
agree.
The whole reason, or in my opinion, that's kind of the major reason why we've
Would want
allowed
circular
that and done that. I mean, I've gone to the Board of Adjustment to get to it
Duke, help me.
long ago.
I don't believe that Rollingwood has always had a prohibition against circular driveways.
Well, I don't know that historically.
I don't have one, but I do have a problem if,
No, I think it's new. I think it came up, and because Dave brought this topic up because he was at a council meeting when it was just
Well, it's been there 15 or 20 years. I
Oh.
know that.
a
But I don't,
this. I don't think so.
the
Well,
circular
according to
driveway prohibition? Oh, yeah. Yeah.
the
Well, I think-
benefit of the circular driveway is what Duke just said. People backing out into the streets in Rollingwood
I know.
is more of a problem, I think, than the issue that the city of Austin has about too many people having entries into the road and interrupting traffic flow. I think, I'm fine with the circular driveways. I don't have a problem with
And
the
that's
circular
not the
driveways.
issue before us. The issue before us is whether to allow circular driveways that are currently allowed on one street to go from one street to the
Mhm.
next street.
Oh, is that all?
It's
all
not,
around
it's
its
not to
corners?
get rid of the
Oh,
having circular
that,
driveways.
and that was what came up just a few years ago. That they put it. That
You're
they
saying
made.
that the
It was
issue
raised
is
at a council meeting that
restricted
Dave
to the corner
attended.
lot issue.
so it'd be a
Yes.
corner lot.
It would only a corner lot. We're
Well,
only
the,
talking about corner lots that connect two streets. It has nothing to do with a circular driveway that's.
I got you.
Yeah.
There,
I didn't understand it that way
This-
either, and Jay,
yeah, Jay, thank you. That
Jay,
was,
thank
that was
you.
helpful. I didn't catch it that way either.
well, then if it's
but
only
that-
on circular lots, excuse me,
Corner
if it's only on corner lots, do you have cut-through problems with people?
No.
Well, I mean, the concern there is a setback from the line of the intersection, that, you know, an apron is not too close to
The
the actual
corner.
line of the intersection of the two-way street.
You know, this came about because of the house on Timberline and Edgegrove.
Timberline and Edgegrove.
Yeah.
That's actually.
Freddie Mueller's old house.
Oh, I thought
Thal-
it was on
Thali House.
Rollingwood Drive.
They applied for a variant. Actually, didn't they apply for a variance and get denied?
When are we talking about?
Timberline and Edgegrove.
Be the southeast corner.
Which south?
When do you think they would have gone for that?
Within the last 2 years.
Yeah, it happened about 2 years ago.
Was it? I can look it up.
And I thought that they should have gotten it.
So
and I
they'd
did-
have to
they
back
didn't.
out onto Edgegrove.
They
Yep.
have a circular drive.
I have to avoid them all the time driving by. When
Which
they're backing
is-
out, it's dangerous.
They
Because
did
I'm
not
turning
get.
left onto Edgegrove and they're backing out.
Yeah,
And they're not able to pull out forward onto Timberline. They're backing out down a downslope onto
know.
busy Edgegrove.
Which
I
has
thought
a
they should
blind
have. I
corner
thought they
that comes
should
out.
have been able to get that, Jeff.
And they can't see me when I'm turning left from Timberline onto Edgegrove. They can't see me,
Yeah.
and we almost collided.
They were turned down for a circular driveway of any kind, or one that
Yeah,
connects
because they want a
two
circular
streets?
driveway that connects from Edge Grove to Timberline.
Okay.
So what it is circular driveways are allowed on the same street, but not on a corner lot. You
Right.
can't go from one street to another street.
And that's,
So they have a circular
I wonder if our wording here on the
They
comments,
do.
it says
They
eliminate.
don't have a circular.
Well,
Well,
They do.
I'm
Yeah,
a-
you're right. They
The
do. They have a
ordinance
circular
is
driveway in Edge
new.
Grove.
that prevents you from doing what they were trying to do.
No.
So they're trying to get rid of the ordinance so that people can,
Okay, but not the entire ordinance.
our old
No.
ordinance,
yeah.
for most of when Rollingwood was built, circular driveways were prohibited. And then about, I'm gonna say 15 years ago, they were allowed, but, and I guess that's when this different, the corner lot driveways were not.
The house right next to me on Vale and Hatley,
A lot of them got
They-
it through Board of Adjustment.
well, it, not only does it have it's a corner lot that connects two streets, but it has a separate driveway, and it looks like it's been there a really long time. But
Remember for a good part
I
of
think Gary
when,
Payne got that
yeah,
done a long time ago.
yeah.
well, regardless, do we have, I mean,
I'm with you, Joe.
I mean, to me, yeah, that situation of the people on Edge Grove, they clearly could have benefited by having a circular drive. So I think we all agree. There was one suggestion that you limit the number of aprons to 2 so that your circular drive is coming off of a straight drive that goes to your garage. But otherwise, everybody else felt like, which, doesn't
And I
seem like a
realize
bad
that
idea.
would limit your ability, you would have to have your garage on that corner,
Right.
otherwise
Well, you'd
people
have to
have
have
a third apron,
Yeah.
on the other
Yeah.
side of the lot. It just seems like a lot of aprons.
Yeah.
But, if it meets the drainage criteria, therefore the impervious cover requirements of the drainage manual, then 3 aprons.
Yeah.
guess is
I don't
okay.
think anybody's trying to do this because they want a bunch of pavement in their yard. I think they're doing it because in
They
situations
don't
like
wanna get run over
this,
by somebody
yeah,
when they're
it's,
trying to back out.
Yep.
it's gonna make their life easier.
So what we want to recommend is just eliminating that part of the ordinance that prevents you from having a connecting,
Two streets
two
on a
streets.
corner lot.
just that part of the ordinance, not the whole. thing.
Correct.
Okay.
My view is we polled the city, we got the survey responses, they were supportive of this. We should be
Mhm.
collecting that information, passing it along to council, and letting council do what they want with it. So yeah, I would support it.
Great.
Our recommendation would be to allow a circular drive between 2 streets for a lot
Yes.
that's front, for a corner
Yes.
lot.
For corner lots. And we don't care if there's a driveway. I mean, we can just pass this
Do we
along.
want-
They can
do we
debate
wanna
that,
say
but
2 aprons max or 3?
I don't think we
Or
should,
do we care?
we don't care.
I think putting a limit on that, I think that ought to be 2. Putting a limit.
I do too, but I don't know if it's an issue with people.
I think it will be an issue with people that don't want to have their garage, the straight part of the apron on the corner there.
Well, how do they get out of the garage? We're trying to keep them from having to back out. We're trying to allow them to have a way to get out of the garage and get onto the street without backing up.
That's true.
They're gonna have to get onto that apron. They're gonna have to get onto the circular drive, and it seems to me that coming out of the garage to that apron and then getting on.
So if they wanted the garage on the opposite side of the house, they're gonna have to have a circular driveway that goes all the way across to the
Well,
other street.
by definition, if we're dealing with corner lots, they're gonna have a garage on one side or the other,
Mhm.
and they're gonna have the driveway on both sides.
Yeah, so they got 2 aprons,
Yeah, they have 2 aprons, yeah.
So they have 2 aprons,
and they can have 2, not
and they
3.
can have 2, not 3.
And maybe they're trying to avoid trees, like maybe there's a bunch of trees, so, I mean, I don't, I think this is one of those areas where we just let people have the flexibility to do what they want to do. I don't have a problem with the number of aprons.
I like Jeff's suggestion. We've got the data, pass it along.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the data supports a circular drive allowed between the two streets on a corner lot.
Mhm.
Period.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
fantastic.
All right.
Um,
It seems to me that they're gonna be limited to 2 aprons.
do we want to talk about
Because-
backyard fences?
Again, I would say 2 acres because 3 would be, we'd see some crazy stuff that we didn't think about.
Maybe.
I think fences is a
But
great
the-
topic.
But Jeff's point is that the comments were to allow the driveway and, or to allow the circular drive, and
I'm good.
just put the point there, put the period at the end of that. Okay, next.
Okay, backyard fences. Seems to be kind of consensus that 8 foot's okay, maybe with neighbor approval.
8 foot, you can do 8 feet now.
Can you?
Can't you just do 8 feet as a matter of right now, I think?
I
Okay.
don't think there's a limit on the height for fences, you just have to get a permit if it's over a certain height.
If it's over 8 feet, it actually has to you have to have somebody structurally, an engineer, because so it doesn't fall on anybody.
Mm.
Now, I have for disclosure, I have and contributed to the cost of building a fence greater than 8 feet in my backyard. It, however, is not in the city of Rollingwood, it's in Westlake and the city of Austin. Neither one of which care how big a damn fence you build.
Well, I think that there's some commentary that I think once you get above 8 feet, it can be problematic. People's landscapes are dying, or, it
Yeah, I
creates
hadn't thought about that.
a big, a
Reflective
big
sun.
shadow, particularly if you're upslope
I
and you
say
build a
8
big
feet,
fence.
And then if you want an exception, go to the Board of Adjustment.
Okay,
What is the current,
I
I
like
think the current
That's
rule
where
is
all
you
that
can
stuff
build
lies.
8 feet as a matter of right.
yeah,
And above that, you've gotta come,
okay.
Yeah,
So then we don't have to touch it.
and I would say we go forward with that.
Okay, so we just,
Well, no, I'm good with that, believe me, but I just, the fence in my backyard is greater than 8 feet.
But it's in the city of Austin or in the city of
And
Westlake?
city of Westlake
And your
Hills.
house is at Rollingwood.
That's right,
And you're good.
that's right.
Do you vote in all 3 elections,
I'm
Tom?
not coming over there to look.
Brian, surprisingly, I have a neighbor behind me, really fine young man. The city line from Westlake to Austin and Eanes to Austin Independent School District runs through his house. And they actually, Eanes at one time asked the previous owner where their children's bedroom were so they'd know whether they were being
Oh my
Eanes or not. They actually did that.
No kidding.
But he gets to choose where he votes.
So isn't it like 5 lots that go down Ridgewood that are in AISD?
There's, if you know where my house is.
Yeah.
Everything to the north of there is in Austin School District.
Yeah. I knew there was like 4 or 5 lots.
But it goes all the way to Stratford.
No, I'm just saying from Ridgewood or from Hatley.
Oh,
going,
yeah.
Going,
Well, Brady too.
okay, but going, towards
All
your
right.
house, there's
Yeah.
like 5 lots that are in
Yeah.
AISD.
Okay, got 2 things, Dan.
okay. There were some other comments that came up about fences regarding front yard fencing, and maybe allowing 4-foot front yard fences for a pool barrier. Do we want to?
Hasn't that issue been recently in the last 2 years in front of city
3
council
foot.
and great consternation?
Blood, tears,
Oh my gosh.
pulling of hair. It was a bad thing. And
Okay, so we don't want to revisit that. Is
I
that where we
don't.
are?
Okay, that's great. I'm not even sure where it's
No.
going, but that's fine. So there's really no action on the fences. We just, It
There's
is
a
what-
fence along Rockway. Is that in the city of Austin that's in the front yard?
well, Duke lives on Rockway. is it Rockaway Cove or
Oh, no, what's the street that enters Rollingwood and, between the city of Austin and
Phil?
there's Ashworth and
Well, there's three.
Ridgewood?
Ridgewood?
Okay.
Oh.
There's a house on Ridgewood, it's a big white house, but they put a fence in their front yard, is that?
Well,
That's
maybe
in, that's
Westlake
actually in the city of Austin.
Or
Oh,
Austin.
and they
yeah.
allow it, huh?
Yeah, Austin, I don't think has a prohibition against it.
Oh,
Right.
yeah, they did put I know what you're talking about.
It's a new house.
Yeah, I had a white picket fence in my front yard when I lived in Austin, so they're allowed there.
Well, you can have a 3-foot fence
Okay.
in Rollingwood.
I
There's
see.
so much transparency.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, well, let's move on.
Other topics that we're not gonna cover.
Zoning districts, I think, seems like there was unanimous agreement that there needs to be language that allows the Board of Adjustment to discuss it if there are unique circumstances. So I think that, I don't know what that language should be, if we want to leave that to council to decide, but just say, make sure that the BOA can actually address it, that there's something that gives them permission to consider unusual circumstances related to drainage, backing to a green belt, if, extreme slope, things like that that creates hardships.
Alex, BOA, if you're asking for a variance, they are by state law have to find affirmatively for 5 things, 7 things,
Yeah, I don't remember how many.
It's 7 things.
7 things.
It's-
7 things.
I think this is an issue that we don't touch, and if there's some way we put language in there, great. Otherwise, it just goes to Board of Adjustment, because it's gonna be unique conditions to
Right.
the local environment,
Yeah.
meaning that lot and the
Lot, yeah.
surrounding stuff, and it's gonna be a discussion about hardships. And
Okay,
it's just a perfect
The
court.
the Board of
to-
Adjustment cannot alter zoning. What the Board of Adjustment can do is alter the
Yeah, we're not
impact
talking about
of
zoning,
zoning.
so it's just gonna
So-
be, hey, we want a variance for cut and fill or whatever it is.
I think it came up because there were people saying, I should be able to build high because nobody sees me, I face a green belt, or I have a lot of drainage that runs across my property, I don't want to be subjected to everybody else's rules, and so I think some cities do this, they create districts, so we kind of put that question out there, was there an appetite, and it was pretty split, as I recall.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, when I looked at that, I'm not sure that that was clear to what they were looking at. You can't put,
More people said no than
Yeah.
yes, but
No, they wanted special consideration for the fact that, hey, we got a crappy location.
I would think trying to come up with criteria for the Board of Adjustments for variances is opening a Pandora's box, and
yeah,
I wouldn't open it.
okay,
I'll give you
Well,
an,
that's actually governed pretty much by state law, and it was just what
Okay.
Duke was talking about. You have to say special circumstances and hardship. That's what
well,
you're-
there's 7 things, I believe, that they have to find. But Jay, I'll give you one. I abut the city of Austin and Westlake Hills, both. They can build right up 5 feet from my property line. So why shouldn't I be able to build 5 feet up to my property line?
Because you're in Rollingwood.
well, and the other thing in the comments, more people commented under no zoning districts, and a lot of the yes comments were very nuanced no's. It wasn't clearly that even the people that said yes felt strongly about it. So we're eliminating this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say.
Okay.
That's too Austin-esque to,
Do what?
getting to be too much Austin if you
Yeah.
put that in there.
Okay. We could talk about dark sky or trees, or we could jump to maximum height, which I think is kind of,
How about number of stories? That seems to be.
Yeah.
a
Okay.
consensus there so far.
Yeah, I think we're not
So it
gonna,
does tie in a little bit to what we were discussing earlier, because there were comments made around how impervious cover and FAR are the same thing, but I actually think that we're focused, I think one of the main areas of focus is the size of the top story.
mhm.
And then, if you were to then take that one step further and talk about, because I think there was some conversation around the building footprint is what matters, but FAR actually takes into account the square footage
Yeah.
of additional stories,
I
so it's
read
not
that
the same
one.
thing.
That's the issue.
Yep, but then number of stories, I think, I'm fine not including it. Survey respondents definitely don't want to include it.
Mhm.
But I think we need to keep in the back of our mind, it may creep its way back in depending on how some of the other conversations go. So I'm okay putting it aside for now, but we may have to
Mhm.
think about it down the road.
Second the motion.
I agree.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I would kind of like to talk about maximum height and reference datum, just because I think it's important, and I think a lot of people are kind of waiting to hear about that.
Well, the number, it seemed to me that the number was not an issue, it was how to measure it.
Correct, that was my sense. What were you gonna say, Duke?
I was just, I mean, I'm gonna throw something in that's just gonna be like a grenade, because I think, you know, I've wrestled with this a lot, but I think somewhere in the height and evaluation of how we treat I use the term edges along setbacks, et cetera, somewhere we're gonna have to wrestle with the notion of tinting,
With what?
the notion of tinting. You know, having
Oh,
a
okay,
tint,
I agree.
configuration that defines the structure.
Tinting was
or
not
the-
popular though.
Well, in my comments, I say, hey, it's hard, nobody likes it, it sounds like Austin, you know,
It's too
tough.
visual. People are thinking triangles.
Tenting was
And-
56% yes.
Yeah.
It seems
Was it
that-
popular among us, but it was
But the
popular
deal
among
about it
surveys.
is tinting, okay, bear with me, tinting would go a lot towards, you wanna call about, height. It goes a lot towards privacy, or at least the perception of privacy. It goes a lot towards the treatment of edges and setbacks along the edges. And, you know, we can throw in articulation if that's an issue, not only horizontally but vertically. And again, that may be some terms that you go, what the heck are you talking about? But, you know, maybe we have to have some offsets along a long perimeter edge.
Can't look up tinting.
It helps solve proportionality. There may be another couple of things I look, but it brings several items together and attempts to kind of help solve some of those things. And at the same time, I know Dave said, oh, well, God, it's like a sledgehammer. Well, I look at it a different way. I think it's kind of a hurdle, but it's a good hurdle that sort of puts a premium,
Alex,
you know, now I'm gonna sound like an
Which
architect.
question is
Puts a
this?
premium on design, but
Thank
it
you.
also, it's a good challenge, you know? It's,
Look, correct me if
not
I'm wrong,
cons-
but doesn't tenting put restrictions on if you want a flat roof structure?
it
No.
sure puts a limit on how extensive that flat roof might be, okay?
But if you know, you can make it like a
But that, to me, that's.
Yeah, I like the
that-
word
that
terracing.
Gets towards
You can
trying to
set it
provide
right.
some solutions
Yeah.
that people are complaining about.
well, I mean, there.
Do-
Well, and even of the people that said no to tenting, there were still quite a few that said yes to other setback changes. So, you know, of all the tools that we've thrown out there, tenting certainly grabs all of them, because we've kind of given people options of how we could look at this. But I do think that the tenting term is problematic. but its concept is
Alex,
good.
when I say the word tinting, I just kind of go, oh,
I know.
God, did I
Yeah,
just say that?
yeah, I know. That's,
I'm with you, you know.
well, and that's kind of why I think it's going to be hard for us to sort of figure out which of these is going to work. But like when we talk about reference datum, we had 3 options, but really there's 2. But then there's a kind of a third one which says nothing above 35 feet from the nearest adjacent grade, which starts to speak to tenting and starts to control what happens at the top, but I think that it might need an additional restriction on eave height along a setback, and whatever the tenting rules, whatever that number average ends up being, maybe
Yeah.
we have
You end
to
up getting back close to tenting.
You're kind of getting to
Yeah.
tenting without calling it tenting.
Yeah.
Now,
And look, there's maybe a better way to describe that. But for our discussion, so we all know what we're talking about, I'm gonna use the word tenting right now.
Well, a lot of people feel like it restricts the design freedom. But I think that to a large extent, a lot of what's been built, if we don't talk about some of the developer projects, they've done tenting because it's just good design, so there's nothing that's really going to restrict or prevent people from designing a big house that looks good on the lot.
well,
And I don't disagree with you. I mean, like I say, hey, I wanna choke when I use the word,
Yeah.
okay? But at the same time, when I keep looking at, okay, all the problems that are really highlighted,
Yeah.
that really come up in multiple considerations, and I'm going, okay, where's a solution in here? That's one that sort of like
Mm-hmm.
gets under one umbrella and solves, 4 or 5 things, or attempts to solve 4 or 5 things.
Duke, yeah, you and Alex both can answer this. Now, y'all have dealt with this in the city of Austin. Would you count that, what they did under they have an ordinance, it's the tinning ordinance, a McMansion ordinance is what I think
No,
they call
the
it.
McMansion ordinance is what they call it.
But, yeah, I know, it's terrible. Hopefully we can do a better job. But has that been successful? Would you count that to be successful, not to what's built, but how it affects the neighborhoods it was built in?
Generally, yes. Yeah, I mean, it distinctly affects proportionality and, the name that it got,
I know.
McMansion ordinance, which is not the name of the ordinance, but, it helps solve that problem. And again, Dave made a comment that it creates weird designs. Well, I don't know that the McMansion ordinance drove somebody to do something that was perceived weird, okay? That could happen in Rollingwood.
And, early on, I called up a number of architects that have built in this neighborhood and that have built in Austin. And the comment about tenting was that at first, it was, nobody really knew how to navigate it, but it's actually made the architecture better, and it's actually made builders a little bit better. It's kind of like brought the level up,
Well,
so.
that's why I said in my comments, it puts a premium on design,
Mhm.
and quality.
Mhm.
Survey.
Basically, what we're trying to do is capture the outliers that have built in Rollingwood that have caused so much complaining.
I would agree.
We're not trying to capture the majority of people building their custom homes, and that's the difference. And when you try and figure out, well, what is it that people don't like about that, but the other things are okay? And you're right, tenting kind of is the one that brings kind of the thing back into scale.
Well, look, I don't want it to be a long, we can talk about this all night long, but I'm throwing that out there because I just think it's something we're gonna, unless y'all just totally say, Duke, go home, be quiet, we don't wanna hear from you anymore, we're gonna wrestle with it.
I will say, if you look at the survey responses, 60% say they want to limit what can be built along the setbacks. That's kind of the high water mark. 56% do support tenting, so more than half. You go to something like limiting number of stories, that's down to 38%. Overall area of the additional floors above a certain level, only 37%. FAR is only 50%. Like, it is, even though the word tenting you think is unpopular, it actually got the majority of responses.
Interesting.
But I
So,
mean, you know, if you set, again, it's not gonna solve privacy, but I
Yeah.
think it gives a perception that it improves it, and that privacy jumps up 1,000 times. You know, how you treat those edges, I mean, again, I just think
How
there's,
how is the tenting implemented in the McMansion ordinance? Is it a setback that changes, the height of the structure? So that you can build up, you can put your house on this line up to 15 feet, and then,
it's a geometry quiz, okay? I mean, it's a defined.
I have to
tent.
remember the 8th grade, is what you're saying?
Well,
I'll
I'm
have to
sure when
say-
everybody first looked at it, they went, "Oh my gosh!" They need an
Is there a
architect.
good explanation of tenting somewhere that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got the book right there. Well, again, back to Jeff's
Got it up right
point
here,
about the percentage of people that said they supported tenting. If you look at the comments of people that said no, there's a lot of people that say, on the surface, it seems okay. Need more information. Not sure. Not sure. I have no idea what this would mean. You know, so it's not unsure. You know, and so
Well,
there's even more people that are probably thinking it's a good idea.
my concern with it is just resource constraints. So, you know, when you read through the code for Austin, it's pretty involved. Like, Duke, are you advocating for us starting with theirs and then modifying it, or how would you actually go about constructing it?
I think that's, you know, if you told me, okay, Duke, you gotta do that, I'd start there and try to, in essence, simplify it if best we can. Now, again, you know, it's incumbent upon the designer, the architect, engineer, whoever that person is, they've gotta prove out the case that it fits within the tent. And I mean, that's a requirement that the city of Austin puts on their, you know, with their drawings and so
Would-
forth. And that's not, to me, that's not a crazy requirement.
Duke, would you think that we'd have to expand our staff if we had that?
Say it again?
Would we have to expand our staff to find compliance with that?
I don't think so. I mean, it's gonna be the third-party reviewers that we use that are gonna have to be knowledgeable and savvy with that. And I mean, that's not any different than any other ordinance or requirement that they're looking at as they
Okay.
go through their checklist.
That's fine.
Well, do those consultants have an architect on staff to review plans?
I don't think so. I think generally
It's not gonna be architecturally, I
It's
mean,
it's a math
it's
math
problem.
equation, I think.
It's three-dimensional math.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll say this, Duke. I was. If you'd asked me before the meeting, I'd say, no, we're not going to do tinning on that. But I will have to say I will have to step back and take another look at that. If it solves several of these issues at one time, it's maybe. Although I agree with Alex, the term tinning is just really not a.
It's terrible.
Well, and I think the thing to do would be to take whatever rules we kind of distill down and apply it to a bunch of houses in Rolling Wood and see, like, are we still capturing the majority of custom homes and not some of the builder homes, or, you know, how does that work?
Well, again, look, Tom,
You did a good job.
a while back, I felt the same way with you. I was like, oh my gosh, I hope we don't bring this
Yeah.
up. And, you know, I just kept it in the back of my folder because people kind of keep asking or referring to it sometimes. But I'm just saying, having looked from the other side and said, okay, what are the problems that are existing out there? And is there a solution that, you know, starts to be more encompassing than kind of one
Let
at
me
a
see
time.
that, I wanna pull a copy, give me the reference, I'll pull a copy tomorrow, I'll read this thing.
Subchapter E.
There was something in the paper today about that.
Didn't see it.
While we're talking about
It's
tenting, do we want to
subchapter
talk
F
about
of the
setbacks
resolution.
or
Well,
maximum height? Go back,
Just-
wrap that up.
Follow-up question on tenting. Do you have a vision for who and how this would be derived? Because
Well,
let me take a step back. How did Austin do this? Like, who wrote this code?
I'm sure they're, you know, within their staff and probably maybe a professional consultant, a land planner, that could be accomplished.
So maybe what
And I'd say
CRC could do
between
is
us and if we had a third-party land
Well,
planner
but
that we
fundamentally,
were utilizing
actually,
their
this
expertise.
is an
Well, and I think the
example of
other
how
thing
much
that's
freedom you have
notable
within
is
the
that
tent.
Austin's lots tend to be
'Cause this is
smaller
the tent.
on
Yeah.
average than Rolling Wood.
That's the
And
tent,
so
and this shows
if
you how
anybody's
much
listening to us talking
you
about
have
tenting,
limited
we're not gonna
in
just
that one
take the
line.
Austin rules
There
and
would be limited.
set them onto Rolling Wood. We
But
would
this-
tailor it to having, you know,
Yeah,
and
you
maybe
know, where
a
we have
setback
sloping
change.
lots, we can even, I mean, this, I don't, like I say, I don't wanna just grind about details, but, you know, you can have, the tent can change or respond to the slope.
Mhm.
So the tent's here, it slopes, it moves down with it, so you kinda have some control over height and not just, it goes straight over.
Jeff, one of the ways that we might recommend on, if it's where we end up, is to say, our survey indicated there were 4 things that people were concerned about in the building code: height and size and all this. And our recommendation is that the city develop a tenting ordinance that would address these 4 items. And that would go to the, I'm sure then we would get the consultant to help write it, but we would, and our attorneys that the city uses do have a land use guy that does this stuff. What's his name? Brandon? Brandon?
From
That's for me.
Bryce.
Bryce.
Sorry.
Bryce, I knew it was a B. But then let them develop that, because if we tell them what the issues are, they can then develop the ordinance for that, and it would go to P and Z and then to city council.
that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Because my response depends, changes depending on, like, are we actually the ones doing all the work,
No,
or are we making the recommendation
no.
I
that
think
this is
that's-
what
I
the
like
residents
that.
want done?
Yeah.
But I think we could give them a pretty big outline that gives,
Well, you got two
The bottom.
people that are
Package.
experts in that know enough to do that. I couldn't do it.
Would the specifics of the tenting ordinance proposed, though, affect our recommendations on building height, setbacks?
I think you
Because-
start there. Like, you
I mean-
kind of
Give
need to
them those
decide if you're doing tenting. I agree.
Yeah.
Good point.
yeah, I mean, again, if we agreed on the overall concept of tenting, then all those pieces, Jay, come into play.
Well, and things like the building height don't necessarily, like, I think we could keep it at 35 feet, because I don't think anybody cares if the middle of the lot has 35 feet,
Yeah.
because it's not impacting people along the setback, so.
Right.
But avoid allowing for 45 feet.
But does that mean we don't need to look at those 3 scenarios on how to determine the reference datum?
Well, we passed that along to Bryce. This is my new best friend that I never knew about until now.
Bryce is, he drafts these documents in the law firm, and also comes up with the criteria. He is a land planner,
He's a planner.
Okay.
on that.
He's who would be, from the council meeting, the request to have someone come sit in, a planner to sit in on the conversation, to kind of help guide it. It'd be him as well.
So what could be our next step? and working with Bryce. How do we make
Well,
this happen?
I will tell you, I got to think about the pluses and minuses of the tinning concept, because I'll be honest, it was I was a no on the tinning, but I'm not now.
And speaking on behalf of Dave, he wasn't in favor of it, at least according to his comments. He's not here. We need to consider that as well.
Would tenting address the concerns a lot of residents have on foundation heights?
Well,
I don't know that it does.
I didn't put a comment formally in here, but I wrote after the fact, I said, final comment, foundation exposure, limit to amount of exposed slab, natural grade to finish first floor prior to finish grading and finish landscaping. And then there's a limit to the amount of exposed slab after finished grading and finished landscaping. You know, I mean, I hear that comment came up a bunch. We gotta do something about.
Well, I think that when you restrict other things, people aren't gonna put it into their foundation. So these are houses that are going up to 45 feet, and if you can't do that, then you're not gonna waste it on
I agree
foundation.
that for one numbskull that would have, you know, go ahead
That's right.
and have 15 feet of exposed slab for some reason, I wanna restrict that.
I agree.
The
If it's a
foundation
simple
issue,
statement.
how many houses do you think, you just guess, that you think caused that issue in Rollingwood?
How many?
It's 100% of the people that live
Uh,
right next door.
I know, I couldn't agree more. But I mean, when you look at the number of houses,
It's not many.
it's probably 2 or 3.
Oh,
But
I
they're
tell you.
new, and that's
I-
the issue.
I know.
Yeah.
And Jay, you're exactly right. It's the most important thing in the world if you have to look at the darn thing. And, you know, there's some of them that are just, I look at it and go, that should have been a story. You should have just made the damn thing a basement.
But
And,
it's useful square footage. And
Well,
how expensive is that concrete? Just,
It's just, to me, it's just lack of effort
yeah.
on the
Yeah,
part
yeah,
of.
that's part of the design.
Mhm.
So
And builder.
am I hearing that tenting won't necessarily take care of that specific problem, so we'd have to address that separately?
It would generally take care of it, but again, for the one knucklehead that would just be onerous enough to not think of.
But would it be, this is another thing that came up a lot, are lots that slope down to the street. And if the lot is sloping away from the street into a green belt, there's probably an equally tall foundation that nobody ever sees. So does it matter? Should it be,
I live next door to one of them. Yep.
yeah.
It doesn't
well,
bother me.
There's a lot of them
Yeah.
because it was just how they wanted to build on that. You know, for me, I wouldn't do it because it takes you too far away from the yard. Like, you want engagement with the
Yeah.
yard, but for a lot of people, it's just easier to build that way. But it doesn't impact anyone if you can't see it. But if it is facing the street, that's when people are starting. And so maybe there should be some limitation on the front setback. I don't know. Like, I wouldn't necessarily put a restriction on the amount of exposed slab if it doesn't front the street.
I think, again,
I would.
we have a Board of
I don't know, you would.
Adjustment, and the Board of Adjustment is capable of saying, the Board of Adjustment is you have to have the most reasonable people in, the city council is responsible for appointing the most reasonable people to be able on the Board of Adjustment, because they can overrule the city council on some items. So you have to make sure that they know a big deal and a little deal, and they know the difference. I think you're right. I think the slab parts of that have been so visual to people and so offensive that my recommendation would be not to allow it. And if you have it because of topography, that is a hardship, and that is the reason that we have a Board of Adjustment. And, you know, that would not cause a problem on doing that. So, and I do agree with you that I don't understand why anybody would have a 15-foot slab and not make it into livable space.
Sure.
Because the cost is,
Yeah. I
We
mean,
didn't,
You know, rule of thumb is you don't go more than 6 or 7 feet out of grade. Because
Well,
of
the city
the
also-
cost return from a concrete standpoint.
yeah.
um,
Did that answer your question?
So would we need a separate recommendation for a
Yes.
code to deal with foundation?
I
Yes, we need
think,
to add that to
I'd
the
like
system.
to put a
okay,
statement
foundations
in
were
there.
mentioned 48 times.
Yeah.
Because I did a search.
and that's on the 2 or 3 that we're talking
Yeah,
about.
it
So
may
it's
well
kind
just
of,
be 2 houses, but, um, all right, so separate recommendation for foundations. Is somebody writing this down? All right,
I think
Um,
Duke agreed to come up with a plan. You had it all written out already.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I
Jay,
just-
that's what I heard. Jay, was that a motion?
I gotta do it. I'll keep it.
All right. Well, you know, some of this, again, I don't know if we want to talk about reference datum or defer that to Bryce. If we want to talk about setbacks.
That's not gonna be what Bryce would do. Bryce would say where you determine, he'll do the wording,
Okay.
but how you determine it is a city function. I don't think he would, that's, my experience working with him is not, that's not how they work.
Okay.
They're not gonna tell you, they would say, this is how other cities do it, but we've already looked at all that, so we do know that.
Do we want to, I mean, I do think that there was a lot of consensus on changing the way we calculate reference datum.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a recommendation that we
Do-
want to make. We don't know what it is, but there's a lot of cities that have looked at this.
I think we need to come up with hopefully a consensus amongst ourselves. And again, I know I kind of chimed in with you about
Mhm.
the average of the 4 corners, and then I went, okay, I did a house that, you know, from the highest to the lowest was 30 feet.
Hmm.
So maybe that wouldn't work, but I don't know. I'm sure we can figure out a way to come
It's
up
gonna
with
take
a.
some graphics.
Well, and
drawings to
particularly
talk about that.
given the percentage, like how much of, you know, if most of the house was at, are you getting the right average, you know, for the grade change necessarily,
We,
based on whatever calculation?
most houses in Rollingwood, when they were built, had 35 feet, that was it. Scenario 3.
But how were they measured?
That's how they were measured. They were measured from, no point
Grade.
can be more than 35 feet. No point,
Nearest adjacent
regardless
grade.
of the topography.
Yeah.
That's how they mostly were done.
When did that change?
Changed in 2000 and
Well, that's,
With the new
and that's what
rule.
Westlake
Two.
does specifically.
And it changed because we tried to recognize, this was actually before there was a lot of redevelopment and rebuilding in Rollingwood. We didn't do it for anybody to build a house. But we looked at it and went, you know, we have such topography in Rollingwood that we need to come up with. And I think over a period of 3, 4, 5 years, we came up with 2 or I think there was originally 1 plan, and then that was a modified to the existing plan that we had then, and then that got modified about 6 or 8 years ago.
I can't remember the timeline on that one,
Well, when I built my first house in '85, it was 30 feet.
Yeah, I stand corrected.
And the
30.
10-foot
That's right.
And the 10-foot rule was in
Right.
place, but 30 feet was the max.
I don't remember the 10-foot rule being in place, and I may be wrong on that, but I do remember that the original was strictly, and you're right, it was 30 rather than 35.
Yeah. I mean, My neighbor asked me to survey it, and I told my surveyor, as long as it starts with a 2, I'll be happy. So,
What is the 10-foot rule again?
10 feet of fall across the footprint. If it's greater than that, you can go up to 45 from the low point.
Oh, okay, so it's not 35 feet above the natural grade then?
I think it may have been 30 feet above the natural grade when
It
Tom
wa-
was
and it
talking
was
about.
30
My house was built in
And Jay,
'84.
it was 30 feet, and it wasn't at, where the wall or the footprint hit grade, it was 5 feet out. So if you had a slope going up, you gained a little bit there.
Or if you had a slope going down, you lost a little bit. There was, and the purpose of changing that was quite frankly to make that fair to protect property rights in Rollingwood. It wasn't for any individual that came in. It was just looking at it and saying, we've got a bunch of slopey lots in Rollingwood, and we need to kind of adjust that a little bit. And this took off when we went from building ranch-style homes to 2-story homes.
And largely that was when you put in the sewer, Tom, because the sewer, when we had septic systems, naturally, we didn't have the 2-story big
I know,
houses
I've been
because we
blamed for
couldn't-
this before.
We couldn't build big houses because we had to, and we didn't have to worry too much about setbacks, if we had to have you had to have, what do you call the field, evaporation field?
Evaporative system, yeah, evaporation field.
So there were 3, on the questionnaire, there were 3 ways to determine the reference datum. And there was, correct?
Well, there's really 2, and
Okay.
the other one was sort of the third one was really a kind of,
But the third one got the most votes.
Yeah.
yeah, but that doesn't, well, I guess you could use that as a reference datum.
It's the
That you
most
just say,
restrictive.
yeah, you just can't ever build above 35 feet, so you don't choose a starting point. So, yeah.
And did you have in your comments somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong, that you did an analysis of some recent builds and none of them would have been limited by any of those 3 reference datum?
I didn't say none of them, but I did say that what I found was, I took the site plans and calculated the major corners,
Mhm.
like all of them, and did the average, and there was minimal difference between, just by like a few feet, what
Did-
they could have built or
This
not built.
included Park Hills.
I did not do Park Hills. I did some that I've seen the drawings for that haven't started. I did the one at Rollingwood and Riley, the white one. And, that one was actually just within a couple feet. I'm sort of, here it is. Let's see, I have to go back. I know I've compiled all this somewhere. So I can't tell you right now because
So
I'd have to go find my
you're
notes.
saying if
but
the reference datum was 35 feet and it was calculated by one of those 3 scenarios, they still could have built what they built. Is that correct?
Well, no. What I was trying to, no, because what I was trying to figure out was if they use the high point or the low point as their reference datum versus the average, how different was that? And that was the part that wasn't very different. But like the house at Riley and Rollingwood, the issue is they have that 45-foot tall wall, but they wanted a downtown view. They could have still stepped that back and gotten the same view without kind of the imposing 45-foot wall. So they could have still kind of gotten the house they wanted if they just made some effort to shimmy it. So
And now we're back to tinning.
I'm not sure if I answered your question. it's a little bit confusing. What I was trying to show,
to me.
so in determining the reference datum under our current rules, when you either choose the high point or the low point, or under the two scenarios that were suggested, where you either take the average or you take a bunch of points and create an average. And what is the difference between those two numbers? And that was minimal. Now, they could, under our current rules, they could build their 35, 45 feet, but we'd have to change it so that no portion of the structure could be above 35 feet in order to limit the height. So I was mostly focused on, are we creating a bigger problem by changing which contour we choose as a reference datum or not?
So you have winners and losers,
Yeah.
and on the topography of your lot, with the exception of whether you go, if you just take scenario 3 and say, no part of the building can be more than 35 feet,
Then go for it.
then it's done.
Yeah.
And then if you have a very sharp fall, you go to Board of Adjustment.
And does tenning overlapping with reference datum cause any issues? Or can these be viewed completely separate, or do we need to look at them in conjunction with each other?
For me, the issue, even if you have 35 feet max, you can still put that along the setback, which is 10 feet from your neighbor's property, and maybe your neighbor is below you. And so, to me, that's is a big issue. Like, I don't think that the 35 feet is enough. I think that there needs to be some control of the height along the
Yep.
setback as well, which is gathered in tenting.
Sorry, I didn't ask my question
Oh,
well.
sorry.
If we went with scenario 3 and we went with tenning,
Yeah.
is that a challenge to actually implement? Because you're doing a tent along a slope. And I'm just wondering what
Gotcha.
Austin did. Does Austin consider that in their tenting
I
ordinance?
see.
I think I'm gonna get this right, I need to look at it carefully, but Austin essentially starts with a grade, you know, if it's a longitudinal direction, and the grade falls off gradually this way, they start with a tent, and it steps down as the grade falls.
Terraces.
consider it-
And that's
I
what
can't
you were
recall,
talking about
Yeah.
in
you know,
terracing.
how long that
Terrace.
first tent is to a second. It, you know, it's reasonably easy to follow, but it stair steps. It doesn't just follow the contour.
Which is, you know, I think I showed pictures early on of a bunch of homes in Rollingwood, big homes that do just that.
Yep.
And, you know, and it's lovely. I think you end up with a better home when you're closer to the grade like that, but, so.
Sure solved that one, didn't we?
Yeah.
I don't know where we
Do
Well,
we
I think
wanna-
that, I will tell you, each time that we have chosen a datum point, it has just been a shot in the dark. There's not been it's been a negotiation, even that 5 foot back from the deal, that was strictly
Arbitrary.
it didn't have any kind of basis to say other than just negotiation.
Do we want to talk about front, rear, and corner setbacks and then talk about side setbacks, or is it going to be hard to, because there's been some discussion about
We can do that.
front setback and corner setbacks. So currently, if you have two houses that back to one another, the side setback of the corner house can be 20 feet, because you don't have a situation where you have another house that has to build 30 feet back. So if you have a 20-foot setback on a corner, and then the next home in between is at 30, is that, you know, that's the issue that comes up,
I'm sorry, the setback right now on a corner lot
is 30.
facing the two streets
on both sides.
is
30.
30 on
30.
both streets.
Plus often a
And then
10-foot
on
right of
the
way.
side yard, I guess you call it a side yard or a backyard, it's how much?
If it's a
15,
long
20.
block, the corner with a bunch of houses in between, those two corner lots have to have 30 feet on the front and side. But if there's only two houses in that block, of which there are a lot of cases like that in Rollingwood, there's only two homes, and they back to one another, they can have a 20-foot side setback on their corner lot, because they're not creating a condition where another house has to sit back. So the 30-foot is pretty restrictive for people with a corner lot, but it's,
And how much is their setback on the backyards, which they have two of them, right?
Same as,
all the
same,
same.
same
It's,
as us.
20,
Who's,
20
They
feet.
only have one back, one rear, and the other's a side.
is there anyone really in favor of the 30-foot corner setbacks? Like, where did that come? Okay, could you state the case for it?
Well,
Is that a safety issue, Tom,
No.
about disability?
no, I before we change it, let me back up and say, there is a visual deal when you have, if you allowed somebody to move up on that, it does create some visual issues that you have to deal with. And that's why it originally was put in on that. The issue that I'm concerned about is generally the largest lots we have in Rollingwood are corner lots. And if you reduce the setbacks, you're going to get a bigger building on it. And that was one of the big comments, is big buildings on that. So, I mean, we are gonna be, that is encouraging larger construction, on there. And that's what my concern is, Jeff. It's not so much that how we do that. If we went to a tinning deal and put a provision for corner lots that where they were gonna be compatible, I think you could resolve that, and then it wouldn't make a difference.
What about a smaller corner lot? Because that seems like a very large setback. I don't know how many of those exist.
I think there are some smaller lots, and
That
that
seems
one
like-
that we talked about earlier, which was at Edge Grove and Timberline, is one of the smaller lots. The newer lots that got subdivided have that restriction because of, they're bigger lots. They built that into the platting process as to what they were doing. Now, the other issue, and I'm glad we got lawyers here for this, that comes to mind, and it just came to mind.
Lawyer, please.
It just came to mind, was, we have 7, 10 subdivisions in Rollingwood. We have a lot. We have a bunch.
Well, we have a lot of one-lot subdivisions, because a lot of the
That's-
older
that's-
houses were simply built without platting at all.
That's right. Well, we ended up with 30 lots that were never platted, that had houses on them. But slowly, we've been getting those platted as we go through. But we have real subdivisions. Hatley Park Estates, that's where I am. Number 4. And I have deed restrictions.
Yeah.
And it deed restricts it mirrors some of the ordinances we have.
Right.
I'm probably the only one that's ever read the damn deed restrictions, and
I read mine, but it's been 30 years ago.
Yeah, I read mine.
when I built my house, I actually took my plans to Herb Smart, the attorney. Smart.
Don't know him.
And had him sign off on it. He was the architectural committee. And he said, well, you're the only one that's ever come in here to ask him to sign the damn thing.
No. I didn't ask because Jolly Clark was my,
Oh, God.
was my
Hey.
committee.
Jeff, I think that's my concern, before we do that. And it may be that I'm talking 2 lots or 5 lots, I don't know. But I think before I say do away with it, I'd like to at least look at that part of it to see how that would have impacted. You know, I keep going back to this damn tinning thing. Thanks a lot, Duke.
I think people that purchase, either have a corner lot that wanna sell it for a tear down and, to a builder, they know what the setbacks are now.
Yes, they did, and they bought it under
If they
that
don't know,
scenario.
They should,
Yeah, I don't know the
and they
rules.
bought it, understanding that that's the case. And now they could always go to the Board of Adjustment, and I don't know what the hardship is, but.
Well,
Well,
okay,
there
then,
is. You can, that variant, I've gotten that variance at least twice. But I would say, hey, I'm comfortable with reducing the secondary street frontage down to 20, what would be considered side, or leave it as is and you go to the Board of Adjustment.
Until I get comfortable with how that we're not gonna be encouraging larger homes being built on these corner lots, I'd say leave it where it is right now. And
Okay with
then,
that.
but I'm not sold on that. I just have to, I'm not ready to make that move
You
yet.
could give-
What
Does that
was the
make
vote on
sense?
that question?
Kind
what
of
if they had the
Oh.
option of
I think we have
taking it out of the
Question on it.
front, but putting it back into the side or the rear? What if they could take 5 feet?
Or if you did a tinning and you put
Some
a deal on
regulations
that.
are-
There's a lot of ways that could be accounted
Some
for,
deed
but
restrictions I've seen basically say if you've got a corner lot, pick one facet of that's gonna be your front. And then you have a setback on that, and you have a side setback on the other side. And
how did, Ashley, we had an issue with the house on Rollingwood Drive and Edge Grove.
Okay.
Because they turned the house
Sure.
on to where the address is actually Rollingwood Drive.
But the front of the house is Edge Grove. That's
Right,
pretty
there-
close.
There's two separate, you can change it by platting, or there's ways of, I think the building official determines the front of the house. And so I don't know if that one was done by platting, and they platted and turned the property, returned the home. But I can look into it.
Did they change the setback? Is it,
I don't think they did. Well,
Which one
because the setback, what's the one, I think it's the one that
It
has
has
the.
It's a new
big
house.
flag painted on the door,
On
on the
the-
garage door that faces on Rollingwood Drive. Is that the
There's
house
no
you're
way
talking
that
about?
is 30 feet.
And
no.
I think they're set back the same everybody else is on the Rollingwood Drive, but they're.
It is, but not on the side. It looks.
But not on Edge Grove.
Yeah, looking at it right here. But,
How'd they do
oh,
that?
you know what? They back to another house, so they're allowed 20 feet because there's only 2 houses,
Or a block.
Okay.
so that is.
Is that, Alex, is that in the zoning?
'Cause I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah,
I didn't
That
either.
if you've just got a 2-lot, you
yep,
know, street to street, and they're
Two-
both corner lots, I didn't know that.
yeah.
20 feet when 2 lots extend the length of 1 block and have a budding rear lot line.
Yeah.
So we're a little bit pregnant on this issue regardless, right?
I think so. What we are is tired. It's approaching 7:00.
Yes.
Okay.
I have to go
Made
take,
good progress.
I hope.
Let me ask, well, we're not gonna make any recommendations because we have to take a vote on it, right? And so we're gonna just wait and summarize our notes and then keep
I-
talking about
Yeah,
it.
let's just keep this conversation
going.
going, because
Okay.
we have eliminated some things by,
Mhm.
you know, sort of mutual discussion and
Yeah.
agreement, but.
Okay,
And I want to study the McMansion ordinance and see about what that looks like.
okay.
And we know everybody's mad at Duke for mentioning
No,
ten.
We're not at all, and do not interpret
Duke, we're
any
mad
of
at you,
that.
but not because of that.
I'm good with that.
No. Did we move through all these items on our agenda? Number 4, discussion and possible action to support recommendations from the action spreadsheet. I think we did that.
I I think
Yeah.
we touched everything in some form or
Discussion and
fashion.
possible
I think
action
we're
for
down to
recommendations
6.
to be discussed at the next planning and zoning meeting. We don't have any of those.
Yeah, I think
So-
that, just for the record, I'll make a motion to table item 5.
Okay,
And I will
Second.
second that.
okay.
All in
All
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item 6, discussion and possible action on future meeting dates and agenda topics for discussion. Do we have
What would be
another
our
meeting?
our normal meeting would be in what, 2 weeks?
2 weeks. I think that we definitely have to, I have to think and look at the tinning ordinance to see how that will affect the issues that these 4 or 5 things that I think are important to look at, see how
Well,
that
I
would
would
do
just say that we continue this conversation in 2 weeks at the regular meeting.
it. Yeah.
I have a conflict on that day.
Well, let's
That's
move the
gonna make
date,
it
but keep it about 2 weeks.
Well,
And
yeah.
we are getting into the holiday season.
Yeah, I
there,
know,
folks.
the next date would be the 19th. I may just have to call in, 'cause I don't wanna delay the meeting. I mean,
I want to take this opportunity to thank Alex for chairing this meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Great
Good job.
okay. Are we done? Motion to adjourn?
I'll
Or Are
make a
we gonna
motion
still
that we
making
adjourn.
the,
I will vote with my feet to a second.
all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
But what are we gonna do about future meeting dates?
Yeah, I think we
We're
leave
just gonna
it.
kind of informally talk about that?
We'll leave it for now and I'll just figure out what I can do. I have to
Oh.
have, are we still on?
Yeah.
Just, we're adjourned at, what time is it? 6:52?
6:52?
Okay,
Adjourned?
all right.
Thank you.